The question before the House is, will the House agree to the amendment? On that question, the Speaker recognizes the gentleman from Chester, Mr. Milne.
Mr. Speaker, will the maker of the amendment stand for interrogation?
The gentleman indicates he'll stand. You may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, is the maker of the amendment aware that a judge ordered in Washington County, a countywide property reassessment just a couple of weeks ago on the 9th of June, 2011?
Mr. Speaker, I'm aware that an order was entered to enforce a stipulation between two school districts and the county.
Mr. Speaker, is this, given the fact that it was just 2 weeks ago, not a sufficient remedy to allow to have some time to go into effect before we try to prescribe a legislative remedy for this situation?
Mr. Speaker, I believe actually the timeline is the exact reason that we need to do this. This is something that has been going on in Washington County since 2008 was when the original suit was filed. During that time, the legislature has taken action through the study through the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee. We've passed House Bill 1661 last session, which dealt with the issue of a moratorium on reassessment so we could address some legislative issues. And it's also been the subject of policy committee hearings and joint hearings of the local government and finance committees, bipartisan here in the House.
Mr. Speaker, should I assume then that the maker of the amendment is skeptical that a judicial remedy will bear fruition here in this matter? Is that the concluding point?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that if the taxpayers of Washington County are being asked to pay $8 million of taxpayer money for a flawed reassessment, I'm going to avail myself of every possible legislative remedy to make sure that doesn't happen, because this is an important issue.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of the taxpayers, most of these property owners will not see the reassessments until probably 2014. To your knowledge, have any of the school districts applied for waivers to go above the index?
I don't know the answer to that, Mr. Speaker. I'm not aware of the answer to that, although I will say that given that it was brought about as a court action by two school districts, that has indicated to me what some of the motivations for this may be.
Mr. Speaker, there have been reports in the press that indicate the gentleman from Washington County has introduced a 7-bill package that is based on a 2010 report. Would you be able to elaborate on what that report did say?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and actually those bills weren't all mine. I believe some of them are also my colleague Representative Newman's. But those bills, it's a variety of different measures, some of which are to create a task force to address some of the technical issues. Some of them were to take, there were technical issues on the reassessment process as a result of the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee report. They were almost verbatim recommendations. And then the final one was the context of this amendment, which was House Bill 1468.
Mr. Speaker, have any of those bills been introduced?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I believe they all have.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the questioning about the Department of Education. And I would ask the Speaker, is the Speaker aware that the Department of Education has the ability to withhold subsidies to a local school district?
I am, Mr. Speaker.
Is the Speaker aware that it has been past practice when there have been violations by school boards to withhold financial subsidies to the local school district?
I am not aware of any instance where that has happened, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, if a particular local school district that perhaps is in Washington County has been shown to be in violation of prevailing law, is there no reason that prevailing practices by the Department of Education in Pennsylvania could not simply withhold subsidies in future budget years to remedy the situation the gentleman's facing in Washington County?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hesitate to go too deep into a hypothetical, but I will say that under the current law, a concern I would have would be that if the Department of Education withheld state subsidy without any sort of a punitive impact, I would be concerned that the impact there would be local taxpayers would actually be forced to pay more and receive less state funding, and that would be the only impact, which to me doesn't seem fair to the taxpayers in that community.
Mr. Speaker, I would raise the observation that it is a practice of the Department of Education here in Pennsylvania to withhold subsidies at times. And I would raise the question to the gentleman of why such practice could not be a remedy for the situations he articulates and is the objective of his amendment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I believe I can't speak to the motivations of the Department of Education. All I know is that this amendment, if passed, will provide an additional level of protection for the taxpayers all across Pennsylvania, residents, small business owners, everybody. And I think that that's something that we in this legislature should be committed to.
Mr. Speaker, given that it is standard practice that the Department of Education can withhold subsidies under certain prescribed circumstances, that is prevailing law already, what is the necessity to switch the burden of responsibility to the state treasurer for the purposes of the amendment?
Mr. Speaker, that was the way the amendment was drafted. My thought is that we determined that was the appropriate avenue to take it. And again, my thought is anything that provides additional level of taxpayer protection against property tax increases should be the policy of this House.
Mr. Speaker, is there a fiscal cost to the amendment? Mr. Speaker, is there a fiscal cost to the amendment which the gentleman from Washington County has filed?
Mr. Speaker, I do not believe so. I actually just spoke with someone from the Attorney General's office a short while ago. They indicated that and they have no opinion on this, they are not opposed, and that they've indicated that the fiscal cost would be almost minimal because this is a situation that would almost never occur, assuming the school boards were cognizant and obey the law.
Mr. Speaker, is it not possible that if there is one instance of the application of the objective of the amendment the gentleman has filed, perhaps that is valid, that there will be no cost for one-time application of the amendment? But this amendment sets a precedent that, of course, any of the 500 school districts in the state could avail themselves of. If this practice becomes more standard, more widespread, would that not begin to add a fiscal cost to the amendment?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that if the Commonwealth is obligated to enforce any of its laws, you could always make an argument that there'd be a fiscal impact for anything.
Mr. Speaker, I am in receipt of information from the Attorney General's office, an office which this gentleman from Washington County has just referenced, and I would be happy to share the information with the gentleman. I realize it is not in front of him, but the information that I am in receipt of indicates that the cost of this amendment for the Attorney General's office would be close to $200,000, $182,885 to be specific. Does the gentleman from Washington County have a comment?
Gentleman suspend. I'm not sure that that's quite a proper question. Do you have a comment? I think there's a way to ask your question, but an open-ended, do you have a comment? I don't think it's quite
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
accurate.
I'll rephrase. Mr. Speaker, does the gentleman from Washington County disagree with the figure that has been provided to me, the figure of $182,885? And again, I'd be certainly happy to share the document that I do have.
Mr. Speaker, I will base my interpretation of the fiscal impact on the fiscal note that was signed off on by the Republican Appropriations Chairman, and I'll quote, "Adoption of this amendment will have no adverse impact on Commonwealth funds."
Mr. Speaker, I would just raise the observation because the gentleman from Washington County referenced the Attorney General's office and its apparent position on the amendment. The Attorney General's office will be the frontline administrators of the amendments, and the amendments, the information I have received, again, indicates the cost of the amendment. This is from an individual who actually is in the office of the Attorney General, would be close to $200,000. Does the gentleman from Washington County disagree with that assessment? Just for the record.
Mr. Speaker, I believe I've answered this again. I'm basing my information on the fiscal note provided by the Majority Appropriations Chairman, which I would be more than happy to read again, where it says, "Adoption of this amendment will have no adverse impact on Commonwealth funds."
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes my interrogation for the moment.
Speaker thanks the gentleman. Question is, will the House agree to the amendment? On that question, the Speaker recognizes the gentleman from York County, Mr. Saylor.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose the gentleman's amendment to this bill. As a former chief assessor of York County and as somebody who had implemented a reassessment in York County prior to coming to the General Assembly, as I had talked to the gentleman yesterday on the House floor, I understand and I appreciate what he's trying to achieve, and I agree with him. I believe that there are better ways and a different kind of an amendment to amending the law as far as it deals with county commissioners and deals with the chief assessor's operations and reassessments. I believe that's a better place to put this because I don't believe that the Attorney General is the proper place. The proper place is to keep it local in the counties where the county commissioners themselves can enforce these rules simply by, as I did, and I did it on my own without legal instructions, sending out a notice to the school districts that they can only raise their taxes to a certain limit. If the gentleman wishes to, he could simply write legislation, whether it's a bill or an amendment to another bill that covers either assessment or the tax law, that would encompass the idea he has, but would not put that on the Attorney General's office as a responsibility. I believe it should be kept local. I think as long as there's openness in the process in the county and the county commissioners understand that. In fact, I spoke to the gentleman, the chief executive of Allegheny County a number of months ago about this very same thing. And I think he is right in proposing what he wants to do from the point of the end results, but wrong in the way he's going about it. So I ask for a no vote on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question is, will the House agree to the amendment? On that question, the Speaker recognizes the gentleman from York, Mr. Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to oppose A03484. The school code of 1949 also already provides perfect access to take care of this issue. While property taxes is a major issue on many constituents' minds, many legislators within this chamber, the double penalty will only provide for a double increase in property taxes after the AG gets involved. In the school code section 25-2552, withholding state appropriations specifically allows the superintendent of public instruction to withhold the payment of all money due any school district out of any appropriation made by the Commonwealth for any purpose until all reports required by law and due at such time have been filed either with the Department of Public Instruction or other proper authority, whether or not such reports have any bearing on the right to such payment, and until all the school district's records bearing on its rights to reimbursements have been submitted on such uniform forms and in such manner as shall be prescribed by the department. At his discretion, he may, in like manner, withhold any or all appropriations from any district failing or refusing to comply with the laws and regulations of any department of the government of this Commonwealth for preserving the health or safety of pupils enrolled in the public schools. Mr. Speaker, we have the opportunity already to do this. I would ask the gentleman to work with the Secretary of Education in ensuring that his school districts apply to current state law. Also, I might remind the General Assembly, House Bill 1696 is on the agenda for tomorrow. It is prime sponsored by my colleague from Allegheny and Washington counties, which will do a one-year moratorium on court-ordered assessments, which would actually fix this problem and buy time for that. So I appreciate my colleagues' negative vote on this, and I would applaud the prime sponsor of the amendment for trying to protect his property taxpayers, and I would ask that he seek remedy already provided under the school code to do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question is, will the House agree to the amendment? On that question, the Speaker recognizes the gentleman from Allegheny County, Mr. Marr, for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We spent some time on this subject just yesterday. The gentleman who has sponsored this amendment, like me, represents part of Washington County. This is a matter of some concern in Washington County. But we have very different views, apparently, on solution. This amendment proposes that the real estate taxpayers in Washington County and in any other county in the state that might encounter similar circumstances would be punished with higher taxes if they already punished their taxpayers with higher taxes. Because the state would respond to the first misbehavior by removing state money, which would inevitably require more need for local money. I will not countenance punishing the taxpayers of Washington County, whether they be in my colleague's district or my own, as this amendment would suggest. I stand firmly with my colleague across the aisle from Montgomery County, who provided for some bipartisan harmony yesterday before being jostled after leaving the chamber. Let's defeat this foolishness. Don't punish real estate taxpayers.
Question is, will the House agree to the amendment? On that question, those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. The members will proceed to vote. Oh. Question for the House. Will the House agree to the amendment? On that question, the Speaker recognizes the gentleman, Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The comments from the previous speaker, if you relate them to comments made earlier, the remedy that was suggested also punishes taxpayers twice, but after this already happened. This is simple. If the school districts knowingly have a windfall over 5%, there is punishment. Right now, there is none. The school districts know exactly how much they are receiving in a windfall. If they go above that threshold, now there's teeth and they will be punished. So they will never go above that threshold. Right now, the process puts it on the taxpayer to bring the issue forward and alert the Department of Education. And the main issue with that is, after reassessment, the definition of a mill, the value of a mill is changed. And your millage rate may actually go down, but you still see a raise in your property taxes, and they see a windfall greater than 5%. But the taxpayer only sees the millage rate and doesn't really know that that the school board is breaking the law to bring this forward. Mr. Speaker, I have one question for the maker of the amendment.
The gentleman indicates he will stand for interrogation.
What did he say? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a prior speaker, the gentleman from Allegheny, the majority whip suggested that the county may direct state funds. Is there any way possible that county commissioners can direct how the state spends their money?
Mr. Speaker, before I answer your question, I'd like to ask the Speaker to possibly informally consider striking the remarks calling this, a previous speaker from Allegheny County made calling this amendment foolish.
The gentleman is not in order.
Mr. Speaker, to answer the question, I'm not aware of any provision in law that would allow a county to withhold state funding from a local school district. I don't see how that's possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The remedy in place is not adequate. This amendment puts a remedy in law that forces the school boards to abide by the law. If this amendment does not pass, then the school districts can continue to do what they've been doing. And the quote from a previous speaker saying the moratorium will solve this is not true, because the moratorium does not change the law that allows the school districts to take advantage of taxpayers' dollars. Mr. Speaker, I hope that we stand here today as a chamber and we vote in favor of the property tax, the property owners. Thank you.
Will the House agree to the amendment? Those in, I'm sorry, the gentleman from York County.
First, I wanted to correct the gentleman in his comments. I never said that the county could ever influence the school district's funding from the state. The truth of the matter is it's just not possible. We don't flow any money through the county for the school districts. What I said was that the county has the power as the assessing body to instruct the school districts as to the amount of tax they are allowed to levy to stay within the range of the state law. So that is where I believe the best remedy for this is. And not only that, I want to remind everybody is if every time a school board does something that we don't like, and we're going to ask the Attorney General to sue on our behalf or behalf of constituents, I think that sets a bad precedent. Let's be honest here. I mean, there's a lot of us and a lot of people out there every day who write us letters and complain about what's happening in our school districts, whether it's new school building that's being built that they think is a Taj Mahal, or whether there's not funding in certain programs and categories that they'd like to see done. At what point do you say that, we as taxpayers in our own local school districts have to hold those school board members accountable? I believe there is a process that we can work out that is good for taxpayers. But this is not it. This is not the way to do it by constantly shifting the responsibility of law enforcement on a tax matter to the Attorney General's office. Because the next bill that comes up here, people will be asking the Attorney General to start enforcing issues from the Taj Mahal law, which is now enforced by the Department of Education. We'll be asked as to whether a school district is allowed to do any number of things. So this is just a bad precedent to set, taking responsibility again from the local taxpayers and putting it in the hands of the Attorney General. So I asked again for a no vote.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the minority leader, Mr. Hanna, who asked for the gentleman from Philadelphia, Mr. Evans, be put on leave for the remainder of the day. Without objection, leave is granted. Will the House agree to the amendment? On the question, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Members will proceed to vote. Have all the members voted? Have all the members voted? The clerk will record the vote. The ayes being 93, the nays 104, the amendment fails.